Hi everyone, we're going to explore using the gradient and shape tool. In Photoshop, say I want to change the color. My design is my black, white, and gray studies. I saved my original, and this is the one I'm going to use for my color. And say I want to use a cyan, magenta, and yellow triad color strategy. I am going to select my shape, so I have my auto select checked using my move tool. Without the auto select, I can click around and I'm not selecting those shapes. I can access it in the layers panel, but if I want the freedom of just selecting it by intuitively touching it, then I have to have that auto select checked. Now I want to apply the color to this, but I want it to be a gradient. I can't really work with a gradient because it won't allow me to without you know, rasterizing it, and I don't want to rasterize it, and I don't need to rasterize it. I can go to my shape tool, my rectangle tool, and because I have pre-selected these colors, watch what happens. I want a gradient, so rather than a solid or a striped fill, I want the gradient. And notice here, that color is already blended because of the selection that I made. So I'm going to select that, and watch what happens. I can adjust the way the color blends. I can go from linear, I can do radial, I can change the angle of it, make it more expansive or a different angle. I can change the scale, make it smaller, tighter, wider. So there's a lot of different things that we can do to really address the gradient and make some really interesting options. Okay, and say now I want to change the stroke from black to a color. I want this, let's see, I'm going to select a brighter magenta and say okay. Now because that's there, watch what happens when I click on the stroke option, that color is there. So now what happened? I completely changed it. Somehow it changed back to the black and white. So in the gradient panel. So let's do the stroke line first. Now let's go for the fill. And I'm going to lighten this up because I wanted a lighter transition there and say okay. So now I have the light to the dark. Now let's click on, I'm still in this shape tool, click on the fill, click on the gradient, there it is again. Okay, now I've got both of them and I can continue to manipulate it and adjust it. The radial, I like that, so I'm going to just change the angle a little bit and see how I like that bigger glow so it doesn't look like quite so much like an eye, and that's going to be okay. So I'm going to click on some other tool to release it. The marquee tool is convenient. Click on the background, release that. Now say I want to add a background. I can go down to the background, and because I want my background to be a cooler color so it drops back in space, and I'm working with cyan, magenta, and yellow, I'm going to use color number 180, my cyan, and I want it to be nice and bright on one side. Now I'm going to switch this out here and choose cyan again, 180. Oops, I have to make sure I type that in correctly. And now I want a darker but slightly grayed down version of the color so it drops back in space when I get that gradient blend going back. Let's see, yeah, I want it really more neutral. Okay, now I have the gradient. But here, because I'm in the background layer, I can use the gradient blend across the entire background. Notice I already have a subtle gray to light. I like that direction of light, so I can drag and let go, Command Z to go back. If I go just a little bit, it's brighter. I can control the angle of it by changing the direction of it. And I kind of like the angle where it's brighter on one side, darker on the other. Feels like the light source is coming from this direction, so I'm going to leave that. Now I want to go in and change another shape. I'm going to click on my move tool and I'm going to select this shape. Now I need to put yellow. I'm going to type in color number 60, and I want to be a really bright color, and for the other part of the color I'm going to type in color 60 again. And I want this to be a really pale tint, so I get a nice bright glow. I'm going to select my color fill, and first I want to First I want to do the stroke, so I'm going to switch this out so I get a nice bright yellow stroke. Select my stroke because there is my swatch that I'm going to use. Now I've got that color there. Now I'm coming to the fill, use the gradient, and here's my gradient blend. Now let's see what happens if I do the stripe instead. I'm getting a pattern, and I really don't, I could go for something like that has my color, but I really prefer the gradient blend, so I'm going to select the gradient that I had already, and again, if I want to adjust it from linear to radial, or do something, one of the other ones, change the angle of the light, the scales, have it align with the layer or not, I can explore those kind of options. Scaling it really kind of simplified it. So I'm going to now click my marquee tool, click somewhere else to release it. I can continue to select each of my layers using the layers panel, or this tool to select using my direct select, auto select, and then continue to modify each one of the shapes using the shape, and then the stroke, change the stroke, and then the fill.